I want to welcome you back to another episode of Laid Back History. And I am joined once again by James Blake. So James, appreciate you being here. These are my favorite episodes because I get to do a little intro and then walk over there and watch you do all the work. So, because not only does James film it, he edits it, he uploads it, he sends me a video and then I'm done. I like it. So James, I appreciate you coming today. We're going to be talking about something that, this is really awesome because we're kind of coming full circle. This is the reason I first met you, was this. This is how we first became acquainted. Brian Cunning, you guys know Brian. I think you were talking to him and that's how this all came out. You came to the Historical Society.
Was that 2016?
It was like 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah, something like that. 7 years ago even, I don't know. And you took a look at these two items and really changed our outlook on what these were, because I'm not a textile guy, not at all. And so, what we thought these were completely wrong, but ended up being something just as cool. So I'm not going to tell anybody what it is. I'm going to let you do it. But it was awesome to get to see, kind of change our perspective on what everything was. Because, what's great about James is he's my American Indian expert. If I have any questions, I go to him for that. But also textiles. You've been doing your own, weaving? So you do weaving?
I've done weaving, natural dyeing, and so many collections across, looking at the stuff, studying the stuff, talking to other experts, aficionados and people like that,
Yeah, it's awesome. So he's who I go to for that too. I just call James all the time about something. But I'm going to get out of the way, let you explain what this stuff is, because it's incredibly interesting. And it blew my mind when we started talking about the item up front, and then, but really for me the coat was the cool thing. And I know this is your favorite, but the story with the coat really kind of blew me away. So
yeah, did you guys did an episode in the past where you went to William Curry's grave?
We did actually last year for Memorial Day. That celebration, we went to William Curry's grave, talked a little bit about him, but you even found some maybe new information, things that might contradict what we found or update what we knew.
Additional information.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of my favorite things about history is that it's fluid. As more information pops up, I may say something that last year was correct.
And our perspective changes as we go along.
Exactly. You find something new and it kind of changes it. That's one of the best things about history. It's not just an absolute, what it is now is the same as it's going to be 10 years from now. It changes, which is great. So, but anyway, I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to stop talking. James, it's all you.
All right, guys. Today, this is a special day for me. I'm glad to be able to do this episode for Clay. And what we're going to talk about is a piece from the probably early 19th century. This right here, what you see in front of us, when we'll put some footage on it, closer shots later on. This is a scarf. Now, scarves from this time period are very rare, from the late 18th century into the early 19th century. All the world collections, scarves in general, are very rare. So it's a rare thing that the Washington County Historical Society has this in the collections. And this scarf supposedly belonged to, or in the family of, a guy here in Washington, Pennsylvania. He immigrated here from Carlisle, Pennsylvania. His name was William Curry. William Curry was born in 1739, I think, and he immigrated over this way, and he purchased some land here, I think 250 acres if I remember right. And he was married to a woman from this area, and he had 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. I think one son was named William John, a daughter named Elizabeth, and a daughter named Abigail, if I remember correctly. But this piece right here is made out of a type of textile, a broadcloth called Stroud cloth. Now, Stroud cloth is a generic term that we use today. People into American Indian art and culture know the word Stroud cloth, but it's actually a generic term. During the period, this cloth was called many things. It was called Stroud cloth, save list cloth, worn cloth, stop list cloth. These are things that you will see in trade lists and period writings, what they use to describe this type of cloth. Now, Stroud is named after a town in England, UK, called Stroud, and it was on the Severn and Thames River. And I'm going to add a picture to this video of this really neat painting from 1795, and it's in a collection in a museum called Museum in the Park, and this is in the UK. And this picture shows the town of Stroud, and it shows a Severn and Thames Canal, and it shows some of the cottage industry, perhaps wool houses, and hills in the background. And the interesting thing about these hills, which we'll zoom in on this photo, you can see it looks like hundreds of meters of cloth hanging out to dry up on these hills. And they were hooked on tether hooks and lines, and you see people working on this painting. Now, what's really special about this cloth, it wasn't originally made for the Indian trade, but it became highly sought after in the Indian trade. I guess the contrasting colors of the undyed edges and selvages was really attracted to the Indians, and traders knew this and found out about this, and they capitalized on this. Now, this cloth wasn't just made for the Indian trade. When we see these undyed selvages, this was actually a way to help the inspectors in England look at the quality of the cloth. Now, we've got to remember, England basically clothed the world in wool. The famous author of Robinson Crusoe, Daniel Defoe, he is quoted as saying, "Be their country hot or cold, torrid or frigid, in the poles or at the equinox, English woolens clothe them all." And that was true. There's evidence going back all the way to the 8th century that England was exporting wool all the way back to the 8th century. Now, some of the earlier documents I could find here in North America, some of the documents relating to William Penn, his secretary John Logan, they were identifying this cloth as Stroud water, and Stroud water cloth was a term they were using for the highly red, vibrant red wool that they were making the British regimentals out of, that highly red and vibrant color. Now, they might have shortened that as time went on, especially after the Treaty of Easting in 1763. You really start seeing it be called the name Stroud. They took the Stroud water out of it and called it Stroud, warm cloth, save Liz cloth, or stop Liz cloth. And this, we don't know the exact date, but we know that William Curry, I think he died in 1821. And we know that Stroud cloth was traded Fort Pitt, up and down the Ohio River. It was a very common thing. It was traded out west into the 19th century into the western fur trade. So having this in Washington County would be very easily to happen. Who knows, it could have been part of a blanket or just a scrap of wool. Now, we don't know actually who made this scarf. It could have been his wife, one of his daughters perhaps, or somebody, But one of the neat features, which we'll zoom in later on, it has this netting work and with some wool tassels on the end. And it just simply whip stitch the edges of the wool bound on itself, and it's whip stitch. And that also came along, if I remember right, came along with the William Curry coat. I think these two came in succession here at the same time, if I remember correctly. And it was neat to look at this coat, which we thought this was a 18th century coat. We doing further research and talking to some of the folks down at Colonial Williamsburg, we found out that this is perhaps a early 19th century wagoneer's coat. Now, we know that William Curry had a son named William and John. Perhaps the National Road was coming through this area. Perhaps they did a lot of work and travel on the road. This might not actually been William Curry's coat. It could have been one of his sons as well. That's something to keep into consideration. It's definitely a later time period. If he died in 1821 and he was 81 years old when he died, I doubt he was doing any wagoneer work at that age, So that's a neat coat I'm pleased that Clay let us look at this and we added to the information. I think we even identified some of the buttons. Didn't we, Clay, on this? Some of the buttons and the things. But I brought some samples of wool cloth with me that I produced, the Stroud cloth. I produced this for different museums and institutes around the country, private collectors, and American Indian art aficionado types. Now, I was mentioning earlier that the saved list, the bound part, they would bind this wool up with either hemp or cotton binding, and then they would put it in the dye bath, and that prevented the dye from going into the wool, and it left this white selvage. Sometimes you will see different variations of this cloth where the white list is recessed from the list or the selvage. Now, let me explain something real quick in further detail. The list or selvage refers to, you have a piece of wool. You have the width and you have the length. The width of the wool, which typical wool of the 18th century, early 19th century, ranged in 54 to 60 inches wide. A lot of the wool mills, that was their standard width. And you see this on a lot of original items that survive today's existing items. 54 to 63. And there's a special binding that they would put on here, like I said, the hemp or wool binding. And they would do a whip stitch with this. And this was all handwork. There was no machinery that did this. This was all handwork. And you had all these hundreds of cottage, I would call it little cottage industries of folks in England producing wool. They would all come together. But this was also under national control by Great Britain. So you had all these different individuals producing, either they're weaving, shearing the sheep, dyeing the wool, or dressing it, which was a process of making it fit for the market. And you had all these different people come together, and they're under national control, but all these people produced the wool in England. So it wasn't not necessarily a one-man job or one family job, but hundreds of families coming together. And now, as I was saying, the wool was a cottage industry during the 18th and early 19th centuries. As time went on, they started producing big mills. And I'm going to add another image to this video of a mill in Stroud called the Ivley Mill. And I think it was opened in 1835. And you can see at the image that we add how big this mill is. It was right along the Severn River. And it employed hundreds of people in the mill producing this wool from start to finish. From processing the wool, to carding the wool, to weaving the wool, and to dyeing the wool. So the cottage industry started changing as time went on. And the actual wool itself started changing too. They were able to produce different weaves. Stroud cloth was typically woven in the square weave, and as time went on, you could see some examples of bias weave where they were able to change the looms up a little bit and have things coming in at an angle. And I'll show some examples and some close-ups of that in the video. We're going to add some images showcasing period images from the 18th and early 19th century of American Indians actually wearing Stroud cloth on their body. There's a image we're at of Joseph Brent, the famous Mohawk chief, and I think that painting was done in 1776 by George Romney. And as you can see, he's wearing a match coat with the distinctive, I think he's wearing a blue match coat with the distinctive list on the match coat. And we're also going to be adding some trade lists to the videos. I'll put some imagery up from Fort Pitt itself from the 1760s that illustrate Stroud, how much the Stroud was purchased for and what was traded for. It will give you another idea of how prevalent this cloth was. And a neat little fact about Stroud cloth, if you do the math and look at all the trade lists that we know exist from the Hudson Bay Company to the Northwest Company and the American Fur Trade Company as time went on, you'll see that blue Stroud cloth outnumber red Stroud cloth 3 to 1, both in number and monetary value. But an interesting thing that looking at all these collections around the country that I have, looking at Stroud cloth, it seems that right now red shows up more than blue, even though the literature says blue was more common. Talking to some different museum experts and some American Indian people, perhaps why the red survived and we see them in collections more, red Stroud cloth, is the spiritual connection with the color red in American Indian peoples, or it's prettier to the eyes, the vibrant reds. No one really knows. There's a lot of theories why more red Stroud cloth survives today in comparison to the blue, though the literature says blue is traded 3-to-1. So that's an interesting thing. I'm still trying to get wrap my head around. But we're going to take some close-ups of this scarf and get a couple shots of the coat. So Clay will be happy that this is in a video. And I think that's going to wrap up this little talk on the Stroud cloth. And I appreciate you guys for your time and thank you. And I hope you learned a little bit. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, or Clay, he can reach out to me, and I can give you a little bit more detailed information about the Stroud cloth.
I want to jump back in because thanks to James, you mentioned that William Curry probably wasn't a wagoneer, in his later years. So after you gave us all this information, because he told me before we started filming, we looked. So I was able to find a William Curry that was a coachman for the Gooden Tent Stagecoach Company in the around 1817 through 1824. His son. Yes. So I think because of what you found out, the information that you provided, and a little more research, that this is probably his coat that he wore. Now, question for you. Given that, is it possible that the scarf was maybe something he wore as well, or is that too early? Would be more towards his dad.
It is possible, Clay, because like I was saying, Stroud cloth was traded into the late 19th century. Right? Okay. We don't really know, this could have been his dad's, it could have been his son's, it could have been a friend. We really don't know. That's a hard one to speculate on.
Right. But it's possible they go together.
It is possible they go together. But as from the research that I've done and what you told me, these came to the museum together, right?
They did. The Hugh Curry estate, which would be William Curry's great-grandson, I think is what it is. When Hugh Curry passed away, all this was given to us. We got these, we got the Mastodon's tooth. I don't know if I've ever shown you that, but the Mastodon's tooth and a few other things that came from that estate. So,
right.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention, I think it was like 2 years ago, you had me do a couple of reproductions of this.
Yes.
But we don't have them with us today. We forgot.
Okay, James is being polite. James did not forget. Clay forgot. So I apologize for that. But before this airs, I'll get some photos of it and throw them online.
Okay.
Yeah, with it. So, yeah.
Cool, Clay.
So you guys have probably seen it. There's probably images either up on the Facebook page or somewhere already. So, yeah.
Mark Hutter. I think he did a reproduction of this years back as well.
I think well, I didn't know that until you told me.
Yeah.
Which is strange because I think it was probably me that let him in to see it, but I don't remember it at all. So, but at any rate, James, thanks so much. Your knowledge is amazing. I mean, God, there's so much stuff that you know about this, about clothing, about the textiles, about American Indians. It just blows my mind. So
yeah, the interesting thing about this wool cloth, it's a process,
right,
from the sheep shearing to the weaving to the dyeing to the dressing of the cloth. It's a process to make this cloth, Clay. It's a week process.
So, can I ask, did you shear the sheep to make this?
No, I did not.
Okay, so that's the only part of it you didn't do.
Yes.
All right, cool. So I do have a question. As you were talking about, and now my brain's wondering if you said it in the video or if it was when we were talking another time. The American Indians, they liked the white strip one there,
right?
The contrast
in color. Right.
So in England, would they have cut that? They wouldn't have wanted that. They would have cut it off and just scrapped it.
Yes, scrapped it and cut it. But there are some existing examples of some coats and waistcoats that I've seen, inside the seams you could still see little bits of the white selvage where they didn't cut it all the way off.
Okay.
And as I was saying, the inspectors, it was easier for them to look at white cloth and look at the thread count.
Make sure.
And it was up to standard.
Okay. But over there, they wouldn't have wanted to parade around showing that white.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Now, one thing I didn't mention, but I'll go ahead and mention it now. This wasn't only just traded in North America. There's I've seen an example of an 18th century samurai suit that the thing was lined with Stroud cloth.
Really?
Yes, a golf club in England with a handle was wrapped with the selvage of the Stroud cloth.
Holy cow.
So it wasn't just traded to North America.
Wow, that's incredible. So I love the samurai.
Yeah, it was lined with the blue Stroud cloth.
That's incredible. That's really cool. So
now remember too, Stroud cloth. I want to make this clear because it's important information. The Stroud cloth, that name itself, is a generic term. There's different types. I'm trying to make it so the public can understand of Stroud cloth. There's warm cloth, save-less cloth, stop-less cloth, and that kind of describes where the binding was put on the wool. Some of this examples from the period have white lines that are undulating white lines, or it's recessed back from the list. So I just want to make that clear because that's important. I don't want people to think, I said the word Stroud cloth, so it's indicating of all this type. I think I've given you some Stroud cloth clay where you, some of the white list was recessed from the back. On the list.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an important distinction to make, and it also indicates sometimes time period of when the cloth was made.
Okay. So Stroud is just a generic term for any fabric that came from, or any of this type of fabric that came from Stroud, England.
Stroud.
But there's different kinds within that.
Right.
Okay. All right. So I get it. All right. So it's like, say, a cow. There's all kinds of different cows.
Right.
It's not just one type.
Now, typically, it's a broad cloth. It's a heavy woolen cloth. That you can ascribe those attributes to it. But there's differences on like the listing, the white parts, So that's important. And I did an article on it. There's a couple of different articles out there if you really want to research this a little bit more and find out more about it.
Are those available online?
Yes, all of them are.
We'll throw a link to them in the comments down below. We'll put a link on so they can take a look at it.
Okay.
Great. You good?
Awesome. Thank you, Clay. I appreciate it.
Well, guys, thank you. This has been amazing. Thanks for joining us. I know every time I put information out there that James, you're going to be on an episode, I start giving people, okay, when's it going to be? I want to make sure we watch it. So some of our highest rated episodes are ones that you've done. So I appreciate it. The work you've done for the Historical Society, just the knowledge that you've imparted to us to let us understand our collection better. Can't even put a price on it. So I appreciate it. Always appreciate you coming around and telling us to do stuff. So. but and I don't know, you may see James up at the Sports Site helping us out there at some point.
Yeah, we're going to do that soon.
But at any rate, guys, thank you so much for watching. James, thank you so much for being here. And I guess I'll see you. Who knows? James will see you here at some point. We're planning on another episode we're going to be working on. So it's coming up. But I'll see you in 2 weeks on an all-new episode.